we're really excited for you to be on here. I'm definitely fangirling a little bit too, because when we discovered your social media, especially your Instagram, your content is just like amazing. I don't
Oh,
understand
thank you.
how, I don't
Thank
know
you.
how you have the time to make these wonderful posts and do your mini rounds. The
Hmm.
neuro-ophthalmol Rav Deepon and I for sure, and Alex are obsessed with those ones because like we learn so much
Hmm.
on a platform where everything is just quick and
Hmm.
people usually don't post a lot of content that goes that in depth in the information and the cases and just the health aspect of optometry and ophthalmology. So yeah, we're really excited for you to come on here today.
And I think
Well,
it's
I'm
like,
glad to be here. No, I started doing them because it was COVID and our
Yeah.
clinics were down booked. I was there in clinic. So I was like, okay, I might as well use this time to do something productive. So then it just became like a thing where I would do a case every week. And, there's some
Yeah.
weeks where it gets too busy and I just can't do it, but I try to do it like at least twice a month now.
Yeah.
But I'm glad people are watching. I mean, I see like, I spent a lot of time doing it on Thursday
Mhm.
night and then like only like 200 people watched. I'm like, oh.
no,
But then sometimes I get like 600 people watching. So I'm like, okay, I'll keep doing it then.
Yeah.
no.
So,
I definitely like go back and I'll rewatch a lot of your
Yeah.
old videos too, your old cases.
oh, okay,
And
that's good
like,
to
yeah,
know.
like a lot of like new grads who like sometimes message me, I'll like refer them out to yours. I'll like send them your account. I'm like, you
Oh,
have to
thank you.
follow Dr. Banik. I'm like,
Yeah.
any like neuro case, like you go the way you explain your process.
Hmm.
I love it. And like, it's like we like don't get to work beside with a lot of like, especially OMDs or neuro-ophthalmologists.
Yeah.
And so it's nice to know what your like thought process is and like and it makes us more comfortable like referring it out to a neuro-ophthalmologist or even like if something we can manage in our chair.
Hmm.
So definitely helped with my clinical skills a lot.
Well,
Yeah.
thank you.
So
Thank you.
keep
That's so
doing
nice of
those.
you to
I look
say. It's very,
forward.
very reassuring to know that people are
Yes.
benefiting from it. And sometimes my family's like, why do you spend so much time doing that? Like, who's watching it? I'm like, you'd be
No.
surprised. Like, I get DMs from people
Yes.
all over the world, like in Africa. Like I have some people who come, contact me from African countries where they don't have neuro-ophthalmology or, you know, remote parts of Asia. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess people are learning and watching, so I'll keep doing them. But thank
Yeah.
you.
I was doing the same, especially with your migraine facts.
Mhm.
There's so many patients that we have, and we'll go into it a little bit more. I feel like we're already like going getting ahead
Yeah.
of ourselves, but in general, it's quite interesting that sometimes I'll have patients who say they have a history of migraines, and then I look into the ocular health. There doesn't seem to be any ocular related signs,
Mhm.
and then you kind of feel a little like helpless, like you feel like you're very useless for your patient now because they say, well, my family doctor just gave me meds, they don't really know why I have migraines. I've actually been like Rav writing your Instagram handle on
Mhm.
like a sticky note, and I'll actually give that to patients and just say,
Oh, thank you.
there's a doctor in New York who just, her social media is just so easily accessible for patients to just read about migraine and know, these are triggers for migraines. These are some foods you can avoid, some foods you can eat, some practices you can do in your day-to-day routine. And I'm like, no one's taking the time to actually do that for their patients.
That actually leads into one of your questions for the podcast is kind of like, how did I get into functional medicine? So I can explain
Sure,
about
yeah.
that.
We can actually,
Um,
okay, well, let's get started before I keep like fangirling and embarrassing myself. Okay. So Dr. Bonick, thank you so much for coming on our podcast. We're really excited to get started. Would you please tell us just a little bit about yourself for all of our listeners?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Rani Banik, but I go by Dr. Rani for short. And I'm an ophthalmologist and I'm a fellowship trained neuro-ophthalmologist. And I live in New York City. I own a solo private practice, but I also teach. So I teach residents and fellows and med students at Mount Sinai, at New York Eye and Ear Infirmary, and I also do research there. So I do a little bit of everything. I have my private practice, which is really great. I get to work with patients directly, and I love my patients. And then I have the teaching aspect. So I think it's a really nice balance to have that.
Yeah. everything about your social media and just who you are and how you practice is all about wellness, well-being, and functional medicine. So, what does functional medicine mean to you, and how do you incorporate that practice into neuro-ophthalmology?
Yeah, great question. So I actually didn't even know what functional medicine was until about 7 or 8 years ago. I never even heard the term before. And what happened was that, I was working very hard. Back then I was full-time academic. So, seeing patients, teaching, doing surgery, et cetera. And I was under a lot of stress. And I had migraines from before. I had migraines since I was in med school, but I would get them pretty sporadically, maybe like once or twice a year. But my migraines kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I'd been to pretty much all the top migraine doctors in New York City, and they just kept prescribing me medication after medication after medication, and I wasn't getting better. And I felt like a zombie, walking around with, and this brain fog because of the headache, plus the side effects of the medicines. And I said, there must be a better way. There must be a better way to take care of my migraines than taking these meds. And then I started to do some research, and I realized, oh, well, there's actually a lot of information out there on supplements like magnesium in particular, B vitamins. And then I kept going further. And then I was talking to one of my colleagues, and he was like, oh, well, if you have these migraines, maybe you should consider a functional medicine approach. And I said, what is that? I don't even know what that means. Like, please tell me. So he said, well, it's a way to look at health, chronic disease, and really look at it in terms of not just one organ system, but look at it holistically, like all the organ systems working together. And think of your body as, we should be in balance, but our body gets out of balance when we have some disease or chronic issue. And the goal of functional medicine is to get it back in balance. And it really is the foundation of functional medicine, or treatments in functional medicine are based in nutrition. Mm-hmm. And so I was really fascinated by this because, honestly, again, I'd been to all these doctors, and not one of them had ever asked me, like, what are you eating? What are you drinking? How much do you sleep? How much stress do you have? And all those were triggers for my own migraines. And so once I started to address all of that, I realized, oh my goodness, like there are so many things I can do. And a lot of my migraine was stemming from my own choices, my own unhealthy choices. Like and I'll admit this readily, I was living off of pizza, ice cream, and diet soda. That was my diet from med school on, like before med school, college onwards. So years and years I was eating like that. And I never once thought that maybe that's what's triggering my migraines or like perpetuating my migraines. So once I fixed that, to make a long story short, once I fixed that, I realized the impact of functional medicine on my own health. And I realized, well, this is something I really, I think that needs to be out there more. Like most traditionally trained healthcare providers are just not trained in this way to think about the body being out of balance and how to get it back in balance. Yeah. And so then I started to get certification in functional medicine. And now I offer it to my patients, not just for migraine, but for eye conditions also. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how it all came about.
Yeah. And
I feel like I can relate to that. My diet during ICO days was horrible. Yeah. It was like quick meals, especially during like exam times, like
whatever we could find in the fridge. Yeah. Just kind of grab
it together, put random things together, and just
it's so unfortunate you resort to these unhealthy foods because they're easy to get. But you know, especially when you're working so hard, you need to have nutritional support. And the other thing that was my downfall was caffeine. I was drinking so much caffeine. I was having between 8 to 12 caffeinated drinks a day. And I never once thought that was a problem. I was just, that's what I did. And once I realized that that was not a good thing, and I started to cut back on it, then I realized, okay, my migraines are finally really starting to get better. So it really had a tremendous impact on my own life, my health, and my career. So I'm really glad I kind of stumbled onto this.
Yeah, caffeine is a killer. I've seen that so many times in my patients too, even, you know, patients who aren't really students or studying, but, you know, in the GTA, I have a lot of patients who are truck drivers. They drive long hours overnight, and they'll say, you know, I get headaches all the time. And the first question I'll ask, now that I've read a lot of your social media content, I'll always say, how many times are you stopping by Tim Hortons drive-through and getting a double or a French vanilla? And they're like, oh, I'll have like 4 cups. within
It's
like,
crazy. Yeah.
3 hours. And I'm like, there you go. You got
Yeah.
to cut
Start
that
there.
out. It makes such a
Exactly.
big difference. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, it's so important. And patients don't know, like they don't know that caffeine can be such a trigger. And I didn't even realize it. I mean, it's really
Mhm.
something I think it's so simple to raise awareness of, just to ask that simple question, like, what are you eating? What are you drinking? How much do you sleep? I mean,
Yeah.
if you just ask those three questions for most migraine patients, you can address a lot of their triggers just with those three questions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of moving on, talking about like ocular health now. So what made you so passionate about nutrition and wellness when it comes to ocular health prevention?
So as I was doing my training in functional medicine, I was trying
Hmm.
to relate it back to eye health and
Yeah.
in brain health also as a neuro-ophthalmologist. And I realized in my research, just kind of reading about all the common conditions like cataract and glaucoma, macular degeneration, all of these things are age-related conditions, yes, but they're all triggered by oxidative stress and cumulative oxidative stress.
Hmm.
And a lot of that can be addressed through eating a proper diet. And there are many studies, both from the US, from Europe, from Asia, that really show that that diet is so important for eye health. And for people who have lots of healthy nutrition in their diet, meaning lots of antioxidants in their diet, they have lower rates of all of these conditions. And so that really kind of sparked my interest. And then I really started to do a deep dive into various conditions and how we can kind of prevent them through proper nutrition. And then I ended up focusing on macular degeneration. So I actually have a book coming out, hopefully in the early fall. Everything's been delayed because of COVID and everything, but I'm really excited about this book. It's been kind of like 2 or 3 years in the making, but I go into a deep dive on macular degeneration, like all the nutritional science of like what you can do to prevent it, and lifestyle, choices. And I realized, it's a matter of educating patients because they don't know. Many of them don't even know what a cataract is. They don't know what dry eye is. They don't know what glaucoma is. But if you educate them and you make them aware that their food choices can have an incredible impact on their vision long term, not just now, but if they're thinking like 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road, what they choose now will have an impact on their vision health for a lifetime. And just raising that awareness makes such a big difference.
Yeah. No, definitely. I'm excited for that ebook to come out too. I think some of our listeners will enjoy some of the questions we ask in a little bit about macular degeneration,
Mhm.
because of course that's one of the most common eye diseases all of us are seeing, especially with our elderly population. So like we've mentioned, you do stress the importance of nutrition throughout all of your public platforms, and throughout your practice. And you've mentioned on your Instagram posts, particularly, that you've had some patients actually come off their medications completely, due to improving their nutritional diet and overall well being. Would you mind giving us some examples of what particular, like, medical and ocular conditions could significantly improve or fully resolve just even with nutrition alone?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one particular patient comes to mind. This is a gentleman who was in his mid 60s, and he was overweight. He was pre-diabetic. He had hypertension, high cholesterol, cardiac issues that he really wasn't taking care of. He just wasn't taking care of himself. And sometimes he would take his medicines, sometimes he wasn't. And this was someone who was highly educated. He was actually an engineer who had retired. So he just didn't really think much about all of these conditions, and he just went on with his lifestyle choices, nutrition, etc. And then what happened was he ended up getting an NAION in one eye, so ischemic optic neuropathy. And I talked to him about the importance of just maintaining good overall health to try to prevent a stroke in the other eye. Really, that was really my focus for him. And I just made him aware of just by changing the types of foods that he's eating. Particularly, he had a very high sugar diet, um, lots of fried foods, unhealthy fats, and it wasn't overnight, obviously. So these were multiple discussions over weeks to months. But making those changes in his diet. When he finally decided to do it, and the reason why he ended up doing it was not because of his eye issue. He actually ended up having a heart attack. And that was kind of his wake up call, like, okay, now I really need to do this. But once he did it, it was incredible. He lost 30 pounds. I put him on a very specific diet that I call the cardiometabolic diet to address diabetes, high blood pressure, metabolic syndrome. But he lost 30 pounds. He came off of his blood pressure meds. And his doctor was previously going to put him on metformin and maybe something else for his diabetes. And then he's like, I don't need it anymore. And the only thing he was taking was a statin, basically, because he'd had the heart attack. But it was so incredible to see this incredible change in someone who was so resistant to it. But I think, I think it sometimes takes an event like that to happen, like something very serious to happen, for people to realize, okay, I really need to start paying attention to my own health and what I'm eating and what I'm doing. And he also started exercising, which he never did before. So he was one of my, I guess you could call him like one of my poster children for these types of interventions. And the other thing was he actually had sleep apnea. And we all know that sleep apnea is a risk factor for so many eye conditions, including NAION. But after he lost all that weight and his hypertension improved, his doctor said, oh, you don't have to wear the CPAP anymore. He wasn't really wearing it anyway, but he no longer needed that, which was really fantastic. So so it really can work. It's just, you have to have a patient who is going to be dedicated and compliant with whatever treatment regimen you give them.
Do you work? Do you work with a nutritionist alongside?
I was going to ask that too.
I wish I did. I don't have one in my practice, and I've thought about perhaps hiring a part-time nutritionist. But what I do is, my practice is it's very unique in the sense that I don't see a high volume of patients. I see, the most like 12 to 15 patients in a day, which is really very low compared to most practices, but it allows me to spend a lot of time with my patients. And I counsel them myself on this. And I think when it comes from me, we definitely have a very close doctor-patient relationship, but I think they're much more inclined to follow my guidelines. And then I have lots of resources for them. So I give them specific, like I was mentioning, I have a cardiometabolic diet that I give them. For other types of conditions, I use a mitochondrial diet to promote mitochondrial health. I have another diet that I use for autoimmune conditions. I have very specific diets that I use, and I call them therapeutic diets. So it's not just, it's not a fad diet, or it's not like a weight loss diet, or, one of those. I try to really, not enforce, but really kind of relate to them that this is part of their health. This is a prescription that I'm giving them. And when I do it that way, I think they're much more likely to comply. And it requires effort, and it has to be the right patient, because not all patients are going to be able to do it.
Where are you finding the resources to develop those diet plans? Is this part of like a functional medicine training? Or are you just researching and then putting it together all by yourself, just based on what you've researched?
Yeah. So the institute that I'm certified with, that is called Institute for Functional Medicine, IFM, and they have it's a very long certification process. It actually takes several years. It's taken me like 3 or 4 years to finish their coursework, and it's online, or you can go in person to their events and their modules, their training modules. But they provide a lot of the resources, and basically what I do is I take those resources and I tailor them to eye health, because they're not designed for eye health. They're designed for general health. Again, autoimmune conditions, or like neurodegenerative conditions like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's. That's what they're designed for, but I tailor it, I adjust it. And they also have some wonderful resources on specific diets. So by diet, what I mean is to go a step further, meaning like they'll have a sample meal plan. So like a whole week's worth of like meals and recipes, like this is what you should eat for breakfast and lunch and dinner, and these are your snacks that you can have. So it really, I think patients really love to have that, because it gives them a path that they can follow, rather than just like, just eat this. It's overwhelming sometimes. But if you give them like very specific guidelines, you can eat this, but you can't eat that. It really is easier to follow that way. And I'm very fortunate that I have those resources, because if I had tried to make it myself, it would be very time consuming.
Yeah.
Like the macular degeneration one that goes along with my book that's coming out, that I did myself. Like that's completely my own. And it took me a very long time to create that. So
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's good to repurpose things that other people have done and
And tailor it to eye health. I will have to talk to you later then about what I should be doing for my thyroid disease. I'm also a person who doesn't want to be on medication. That's just who I am. I really want to try to eat healthy and exercise and see what I can do. But I asked them specifically, is there anything that I should be eating or not be eating for my thyroid levels to go down? And they had no idea. They were just like, no, there's really nothing you can do. You just got to take the medication and that's it. And like 7 years later, I'm still just taking the medication. I have no idea what I should be. And so it's just interesting to hear that there are different sort of like diet or nutritional guidelines for different, conditions to help balance your body.
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
the unfortunate thing is that most doctors who go through traditional training, they don't get proper training in nutrition. And I went to med school a long time ago. Like, I can remember maybe half a day's worth of nutrition. And all we learned about were just like the B vitamins and A and D and K. And that was about it. And, maybe the major food groups like the macronutrients like carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and that was it. And really, in terms of health, like I think that most practitioners really should get more in-depth training in nutrition, because what we eat has such an impact on our health. And in functional medicine, a lot of people like to say food is medicine. So if you eat the right foods, meaning choosing the right foods and also not eating certain foods, you can really change the trajectory of your health. And again, sometimes get off of medication. So I have some great resources for you for Hashimoto's I'll send you. That I will send you.
I've been waiting 7 years. I need them.
Yeah.
I have like a book I just recently bought. It's called This Is Your Brain on Food. Have you heard about it?
I've heard of that.
By Dr. Naidu?
I think I've heard of the book, but I haven't read it.
So it kind of like similar, but it talks about like how food affects your mental health. It talks about like depression, anxiety. That's my next to read. So I'm excited to read that one right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now we're learning, especially with children, there are so many food related issues that can happen. Of course, we know about allergies and things like that, but even they're linking now, behavioral issues like ADHD to kids' diets. And it's just so important to be aware of it. And, for people who are parents, to teach their kids the right way. I think most people are realizing, not most people, but it's just becoming more, the awareness is heightened now in terms of, especially after or during the pandemic, about how we need to stay healthy, how we need to boost our immune systems, boost all of our systems, and just be proactive about it rather than just kind of not think about it. So,
yeah.
So I know you provide a lot of free downloadable ebooks on nutrition and ocular health. And some of these ebooks review healthy food to prevent autoimmune conditions. Would you mind summarizing a few of the most important ones for our listeners?
Yeah, so in terms of autoimmune disease, there is a very close link between our gut health and our immune system. So what we eat can trigger inflammation that can ultimately lead down the road to autoimmune conditions. So in terms of diet, I would say first of all, think about what you should not be eating, because those certain foods can be pro-inflammatory. And oftentimes I usually tell my patients who have autoimmune conditions to eliminate certain foods. And the top food groups that I tell them to eliminate are dairy, gluten, and nightshades.
Oh.
and I know, that's
I know probably, it's all the good food.
It's all the food we love, right? So I used to be the same way. And it's not that you have to cut them out forever. It's just to get your body back in balance, to heal your gut, that can then impact your immune system and kind of down regulate your immune system, that immune response, that autoimmune response. So I usually have people do something called an elimination diet, which is like a basic kind of principle of functional medicine is for 3 weeks, you eliminate certain foods. And actually, if you think about the way our immune cells live, like B cells and T cells, their lifespan is actually 3 months, or B cells live about 3 months. So if you really want to follow an elimination diet, you should really do it for 3 months. And you should kind of like get those cells that are pro-inflammatory out of your system. And then what you can do is for those food groups, you can slowly start to reintroduce certain foods. So, and then kind of test yourself, have like a little bit of it, like a little bit of dairy one day, and then a little bit more and a little bit more, and make sure your body's not reacting to it. And if it does react to it, cut it out. I can't tell you how many of my patients, particularly, I deal with a lot of autoimmune conditions like thyroid eye disease and myasthenia and MS, and so many, specifically my myasthenics, so many of them are sensitive to dairy. So they'll do the elimination diet, and then they'll be feeling great and be able to lower their prednisone dose and lower their meds. And then they'll just have a little bit of dairy, and that just tips them over. Then they'll have a flare, and they know it. They'll say, oh my goodness, I accidentally ate some cheese, or there was a little bit of dairy in this one thing I ate, and their body reacts like that. And it's so interesting to see that immediate reaction. And I think it carries over to many other autoimmune diseases as well.
So kind of going back to your book about macular degenerations. So as optometrists, we typically recommend patients to eat green leafy vegetables. So we say kales, eat your kale, spinach, broccoli. That's my lines to prevent macular degeneration. Is there a more detailed list of foods or ingredients we should be recommending to our patients on a regular basis?
Yes. So in my book, I address this about, the green leafy vegetables. So the reason we say eat green leafy vegetables is because they have high levels of lutein and zeaxanthin that I like to call vitamins L and vitamin Z, and also mesozeaxanthin, which is vitamin M. They're not really vitamins, but they're eye health nutrients. And those are pigments that are found in the retina. And they basically are our eyes' natural sunglasses, our eyes' natural blue blockers. So they absorb light, wavelengths of light, and they neutralize them. And they prevent toxicity in the retina, phototoxicity or photooxidative stress. And so that's why we say eat lutein, eat zeaxanthin, because they're our natural protection, our natural shields. Now, the unfortunate thing is that people aren't necessarily told how much to eat. And the reality is, and in my research, what I've learned is that we need about 6.5 milligrams of lutein a day, adults, and we need about 1 to 2 milligrams of zeaxanthin a day. And most of us probably get less than 1 to 2 milligrams of lutein and less than 1 milligram of zeaxanthin. So we're very deficient in what we're eating from our diets. And even people on the best of diets, unfortunately, just don't get enough of these green leafy vegetables. So I think you have to go further, and I call it going beyond leafy greens. So you have to eat other foods that also have lutein and zeaxanthin, and perhaps even take a supplement. In my research, I found that we need to go even beyond the AREDs because, we hear about, lutein, zeaxanthin, also vitamin C, vitamin E that are in AREDs, and also copper and zinc, but we need to go beyond that. There are actually over 20 nutrients our eyes need to stay healthy and prevent macular degeneration. Like we need antioxidants like glutathione, alpha lipoic acid, N-acetylcysteine. And these things most people have probably never even heard of them because we never really got to study nutrition. But, in my work, I've found that these are all really important. So anyway, to get to to answer your question about what foods, it isn't a specific, one specific food. You need to eat a variety of foods, and you need to rotate through them to get all those nutrients our eyes need. So what I typically tell my patients is, yes, eat your green leafy vegetables, but you also want to cycle through all different colors from all different other vegetables. Like you want to have your various shades of green, you want to have yellows, oranges, like orange peppers, yellow peppers are rich in zeaxanthin and lutein. You want to have also reds. You want to have blues, purples, blacks, because they have great antioxidants, those types of foods. And also egg yolk also has high levels of lutein and zeaxanthin. So I think it's, just to tell people just to eat one food group isn't enough. We need to kind of really get them to change their eating habits to eat the whole rainbow of colors to get all the nutrients their eyes need.
That's actually a lot more helpful because it's true. Like we tell our patients to eat a lot of salads. I'll say, have a lot of salads, have a lot of spinach, kale, arugula, rapini, whatever you can find that's a leaf, throw it in your food and just eat it all day. But it's true. You don't really tell your patients how many times a day to be eating that, how much of a portion size you should be eating. And so that really helps. I feel like I'm definitely going to be telling our patients more often to I'm going to say, just go to the grocery store and pick out the rainbow, all the colors, and then just eat them throughout the week.
Exactly. So,
that's a better way.
A tip that I tell my patients is, and this is a really kind of a practical tip, it's very easy for them to follow. I ask them how many meals do they have in a week? And most people have 3 meals a day. So that's 21 meals a week. And I tell them, choose a different color with each meal. So during the week, you're going to get 21 different colors, and that forces them to eat lots of different things, not just the same thing over and over again. And the other thing I tell them is, in terms of green leafy vegetables and those specific types of vegetables, have 3 to 5 cups a day. And initially, most of them are like, I can't do that. No, that's too much. But what I tell them is, if you have a green smoothie once a day, that's 3 cups right there, at least. I mean, maybe you can put even more in there. So you can get like 3 to 4 cups right there. And then you have, like, during your other 2 meals of the day, you have some other various different colors, and you're getting it just like that. So in my book, I talk about this. And also as a companion to the book, I actually teach a course called Eat Right for Your Sight and Beyond. And it's, teaching them how to eat for to prevent macular degeneration. And in that course, I have resources, like I have a guide, the Macular Degeneration Diet, which has 12 therapeutic foods. And I explain to them, like, how to cycle through these foods every week. Like, so the vegetables, the fruits that are really important, the omega-3s that are really important, nuts, like the specific types of nuts that are really important. So there's just so much people can do, and they don't have to eat the same thing every day. They can have variety in their diet, and they can still enjoy their diet, but they just need to be kind of shown, okay, this is how you do it.
That's really helpful. I think a lot of our listeners will love that too, because I feel like we have the best interest, for our macular degeneration patients, but sometimes even I feel like I don't think I'm really helping when I tell them to just eat green leafy vegetables. I feel like I'm doing half the work.
You are helping, because most people don't eat those.
Yes.
They don't have any, right? True. So at least you're telling them eat these specific things. So at least they're getting started on the path. And that's the most important thing, like taking that first step.
So switching gears a little bit here, you also have a YouTube channel, which previously offered a series called Migraine Minute, where you share information for patients to conquer their migraines. So based off of these videos, for our listeners, what nutritional or lifestyle changes could we as optometrists recommend regularly to our patients with a history of migraines?
Yeah. So first of all, just asking them if they're having headaches and light sensitivity and migraines, because so many people are underdiagnosed. So I think that's the first step. But if someone knows that they're having migraine, if they're having, classic symptoms, nutrition and lifestyle are, again, the cornerstone of migraine therapy. Yes, you can take medications, et cetera, if necessary, but really you can prevent your migraines if you address a couple of important things. First, I would say is hydration. And a lot of people probably don't think about it, but so many of my patients have come in with visual aura because they were dehydrated. Maybe they were out in the sun all day, they were in the heat, they got dehydrated, they just weren't drinking, or maybe they had a really intense workout. They just, they were in the gym. And I can't tell you how many young people experience aura and they get scared because it's like they're having a stroke, but it's just their first experience of having migraine. And it can be prevented by just staying very well hydrated. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, like what we talked about before, is addressing their caffeine. And, I just asked them, how many caffeinated beverages do you drink a day? And what if they drink more than like 2, I usually ask them to try to slowly cut it down to 1 a day. It's not that they have to cut it out completely, but even if they can reduce it gradually by half a cup a week, they can get down to maybe that 1 beverage a day. And then the food issue. So food is such a complicated topic when it comes to migraines, because certain foods can be triggers and other foods can be maybe helpful. So, and everyone is different. So like what someone's trigger is may not be someone else's trigger. So for that, they really have to keep a migraine diary and, kind of, if they have an attack, kind of think back and be a detective and think about what foods do they eat, what ingredient may have triggered it. For example, like processed foods have a lot of preservatives, so that can be triggered. Like MSG is a trigger for many people, and it's a preservative in many processed foods and also in a lot of Chinese food. For other people, it could be fermented foods like fermented cheeses, wines. That can be a trigger for some people. Chocolate is actually not a trigger. I talked about this in my social media, so that's good news. Chocolate's not a trigger for migraine. But there are just so many other triggers that people can have, or too much sugar, too much salt, like things like that. They just have to really think about, what may have thrown their brain off that caused this attack of migraine.
Yeah. I'm sure a lot of our listeners get migraine patients in their chair very often. And like I was mentioning earlier, sometimes when it's not ocular related, you kind of feel like there's nothing else you can really say to your migraine patient to make them feel better or to give them advice. But that really helps too. And I definitely started giving more of my migraine patients just resources to say, hey, it doesn't look like there's any ocular triggers. Like if they don't have light sensitivity, they're not experiencing auras, but I'll say, you know what, go on this website or, check Dr. Banik's, social media, and you'll learn a lot about what your triggers may be. So it's kind of pushing them in the right direction for them to reflect and learn what their triggers could be to avoid them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, we can help our patients be advocates for their own health, because a lot of them don't know where to turn or what to do. And they just think, oh, I have this condition and, I get these debilitating migraines and there's nothing I can do for them, when there really is a lot they can do that's in their power without having to take a prescription medication. And of course, some people do need prescription medications, but and stress and sleep. So stress is like, when it comes to migraines, stress is the elephant in the room. Most doctors don't ask their patients about their stress levels, but I can tell you the majority of my migraine patients, their symptoms are so much worse when they're stressed, whether it's from work or from home or their neighbors or COVID or whatever's happening in their lives. Stress is a major, major trigger. And if they can find ways to reduce their stress, and this kind of goes back to lifestyle. So, finding something that helps calm you down, something that helps put you in a different mental state, whether it's reading a book or going for a walk or listening to music or spending time with family or friends, just kind of encouraging them to deal with their stress and address it, not just ignore it and let it build up, but actually address it.
Yeah, that's important.
Any thoughts on the rose tint glasses, or they call the
FL41.
FL41s for migraines?
Yeah. So I actually, I found out about them because one of my colleagues in neuro-ophthalmology, he started doing research with them years back, and he has a company that makes the FL41s, but basically it's a rose color tint, and that specific tint blocks out some of the wavelengths within the blue spectrum that trigger migraine. So it's very effective for many people who are light sensitive. So not just migraine patients, but people who are light sensitive in general. For example, I also see a lot of patients with concussion, traumatic brain injury, or just people who have light colored eyes, light skin, the lighter pigmentation. Some people are very light sensitive. So it can be very, very helpful. And there are different strengths. So some are, I actually don't have them with me, otherwise I would show you. But there's one tint that's very light, like a light pink tint, which may be okay for like indoors, but when people are outdoors, they may need to have a darker tint, so more of like a deeper red tint. So it can really be very, very helpful. And then there's actually, I found also there's a couple of companies that make FL41 tinted contact lenses.
Ooh.
So that can be really helpful for some people. The only thing is, so it has a tint. So when people wear it, like you can see like it looks a little bit unusual because it's a little pinkish, but hey, if it helps their light sensitivity, I tell patients, it's up to you if you want to try it or not, but it could really make a big difference for you. So.
And so what are your thoughts on the current status of nutrition and wellness being incorporated into neuro-ophthalmology and general ophthalmology? Do you feel that your information has made a positive impact in this area of healthcare, or is there more work to be done?
So much more work to be done. I think we're just at the cusp of understanding how much nutrition plays a role, or not just understanding, but I think, just promoting it and being, advocating for it. And I think that as practitioners, we need to study a little bit more about it, because unfortunately, most training programs have not focused on it. Hopefully they do. Hopefully there's more of a kind of a formal learning when it comes to nutrition and eye health. Yes, we know about omega-3s in dry eye. We know about lutein and zeaxanthin in macular degeneration, but that's kind of, I think, really just like the tip of the iceberg in terms of understanding about eye health and nutrition. And my goal is, so ultimately, once after my book comes out, I'm a little bit busy this year, but ultimately maybe next year, I would like to do an online course and teach my colleagues, both in optometry and ophthalmology and primary care and, family practice, about the importance of nutrition and what specific foods are best for which specific conditions, et cetera. And I think it would just really help practitioners better serve their patients and help patients as well. So that is something that I hope to do in the future at some point.
Yeah. We're excited for that. I would love to be a part of that course, or, whenever you do that, I would definitely.
Yeah. And now that we're all on Zoom, now it's kind of, so easy to do, because I think before the pandemic, we didn't really appreciate all the technology we had working for us, but now it's much easier to reach, a wider audience.
Sure.
Yeah. I feel like more healthcare professionals across the board, not just optometry, ophthalmology, but family practitioners specifically. I think we all know that nutrition will really help a lot of systemic conditions, but it's just, we know that it does, but we don't really know how to explain that and provide that information and guidance for our patients. So, I mean, we're really happy that you are one of those health professionals that are sharing the information, not just for patients, but for us practitioners to talk with our patients and say, these are, specific foods that you can actually start incorporating in your diet to prevent ocular disease. These are things that you can actually start to avoid, so that you don't develop diseases. It's just really helpful information. And I think we can all learn a lot more from functional medicine and nutrition. It's a very interesting area of healthcare that's not discussed enough.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I was explaining about functional medicine earlier, I neglected to mention this, but functional medicine tries to find the root cause of disease. So not just like to treat it on the surface and just cover it up like a Band-Aid, like with a Band-Aid, but really to get at the root cause and address it that way. And I think if we thought about, started to rethink about how we think about eye conditions, I think that would be very helpful. Like, for example, dry eye, now we do look at the meibomian glands and supporting meibomian gland health. That's addressing the root cause, not just putting lubrication on it, but just, really getting to the root cause. And I really hope that, for conditions like cataracts and glaucoma and some of the more rarer conditions like degenerations and dystrophies, that we can start to look at it more of in a holistic way and relate it back to gut health and immune system health and cardiovascular health, and just be more holistic in our approach to eyes. Because we focus on, such small organs, but really they're so intimately connected with everything else.
Yeah. And then just to end off our interview today, are there any resources that you'd like to mention and share with our listeners if they are also interested in learning more about functional medicine, nutrition, and they want to, become certified or start providing these services to their patients?
Yeah, I would say you can visit the IFM website, Institute for
Mhm.
Functional Medicine, and they have, they have a lot of information. It's a great website in terms of the certification process. Again, it's a very long and involved certification process, but it is very worth it. It's so worth it, and just so many things that we, as traditionally trained providers, we never really learned about, like the microbiome, for example,
Mhm.
the gut microbiome and how it impacts all aspects of health. And so I would encourage people to take a look at that. And then in the future, again, I may be able to put together a course by 2022. I don't know exactly when that'll be. I actually do some webinars for some large organizations. So I've done a webinar on eye health for IFM. I've also done a webinar on eye health for integrative practitioner, which is another very large organization focused on integrative approaches, holistic approaches, including naturopathy and functional medicine. So
Yeah.
I think spreading the word, I think more and more people will have access to those types of resources and be
Yeah.
able to offer them to their patients.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. We will add all of the information and resources in our description box. So for anyone who's interested, definitely look in there and you'll find more information if you want to learn more. And we'll also include Dr. Banik's information as well, her website, her social medias, so that you can all learn about the amazing content that we've been raving about before this interview
Thank
even
you.
started.
Thank you.
Yeah, but thank you so much, Dr. Banik, for making it on
Right.
our podcast. We really appreciate it. We had such a great time getting to know
Thank
you.
you. And same here. I
Yeah.
enjoyed chatting with you both and learning more about you and what you do. So I'm glad
Yeah.
we met through Instagram. It was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yes.
Yeah.
We will definitely chat with you another day because we want to learn more. We want to pick your brain a lot more too about neuro-ophthalmology
Mhm.
specifically too, not based on nutrition, but just, how optometry and neuro-ophthalmologists can co-manage patients, make referrals. So we'll definitely keep in touch so that we can pick your brain a lot more about that stuff too.
Absolutely. It's actually my first passion was neuro-ophthalmology, and then my
Yeah.
second passion became nutrition and wellness. So I
Yeah.
love to talk about neuro-ophthalmology, and yeah, I'd love to chat about, if you have specific cases you wanted to review, I'd be happy
Yeah.
to do that at some point
Yeah.
in the future.